Here.
Commissioner Domingue? Here. Commissioner Lawrence?
Here.
Commissioner Noble?
Here.
Commissioner Lamb-Newsom?
Here.
Commissioner Everett?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to ask for approval of the minutes from our January 11th meeting. Hopefully everybody got the advanced copy of those, had a chance to review them. Are there any suggested changes or additions or deletions to that? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I'm just going to do an aye vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Shane, I'm going to give the new business item number 1 to you with the twice a month, because that's a staff suggestion, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a couple of housekeeping issues. First of all, for the commissioners, make sure that when you're speaking that your mic is on and that you're speaking into your mic so that the people at home watching can hear you and that there's a proper recording. We don't usually have crowds like this, so a couple of housekeeping issues. Number one, if everybody can check their cell phone, make sure you got it on vibrate. That's always an embarrassment. I'm always the guilty party. There's coffee in the back, help yourself, and see that exit sign in the back, right through those doors is where you want to be if you need the restroom. So those are probably the 3 biggest issues we got tonight. So with that, the Planning Commission meeting twice a month, Mr. Chair and commissioners, we had suggested that because we're on the cusp of probably discussing 2 of the most major developments probably in the history of Madera Beach. And there are some smaller issues that I don't want to say have fallen through the cracks, but obviously have been put on the back burner. One, for example, is digital signage. If you wanted to take up those smaller issues at a second meeting a month, you could do that per our code. You know, I'm going on my 5th year here, and I think we've been discussing it for 5 years, and I think we've got a pretty heavy workload probably staring at us for the next 8 to 12 months, and my suggestion would be to leave it at once a month. I think you're going to have enough work. Staff certainly will have enough work, and considering what we're talking about, I don't know if digital signage takes precedent over a couple of $100 million developments at this juncture. So staff recommendation would be to keep it at once a month.
And is it proposed that we would start that in March or this month or?
To go to twice a month?
Yeah, immediately?
You're the chair. The recommendation is
Yeah.
to not do that. But it's your call.
Okay.
You guys set the meetings. If some of those smaller issues are things that you want to take up, we can certainly do that. But again, I can remember, you know, these discussions dating back 2 to 3 years. And if we want to get going on it, we certainly can. But I think that our focus needs to be on some of these more major issues at
Right.
this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, any thought on the commission by any of the board members on that? Do we want to think about it? Mike?
I would say let's keep it once a month.
Okay.
Once a month, but if we had to call the occasional second meeting, what
yeah.
kind of notice do we have to put out?
I think, and Mr. City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, suitable notice is 24 hours advance notice. Obviously, we have to get you information in a packet and
Right.
what you want to discuss. I appreciate the sentiment that I hear, because the one thing that you don't see behind closed doors is there's a heck of a lot of work to just put out this packet. And so if we're going to go to every other week, it's going to be a nightmare administratively. And like I said, I mean, the mere size and I don't want to call it drama, but the associated work that's with these major developments, I think it's okay to put a couple of things
No, I
on the
agree.
back shelf for.
Particularly when we're getting a 3-inch binder per meeting.
Correct. Yeah, you know, and let's face it, after a 3-hour meeting on one issue, do you really want to talk about digital signage? I mean, it's a big enough issue that you want to give
Sure.
it the attention it deserves, and I think you're just going to get, you know, burned out, frankly.
Well, yeah. To Jeff's point, I think if something came up, we could then make a determination as a
You can always
one-off.
hold a special meeting.
Okay.
You know, if there's something, or, you know, a constituent calls and says, hey, let's get going on this. It's just adding it to an agenda like we have tonight is, you can see, somewhat problematic.
Okay. Well, we'll defer that then. Any further discussion on that before I move on? Oh, we're good? Okay. I'll move then to old business. I wanted to check and see if the representative for the ATM project was year? You are, yes, sir. Okay. Then, can we get something from staff on that before we move forward? Lou?
He wants the
Tom?
staff presentation is
Right.
going to be made by Mr. Cerna.
Okay, Mr. Cerna will do that. You may proceed.
All right. As you may recall, Commissioners, this last item was continued from the November 19th, 2015 meeting due to questions regarding impacts of the proposed drive-up ATM at the CVS site to the adjacent Winn-Dixie Plaza site, which at the time of the meeting was continuing or was discussing plans for redevelopment of the site. And the concern was that the ATM could potentially create a conflict because it was between the Winn-Dixie site and the beach. To date, the city has not received any formal submissions. There have been discussions, and I mean from Winn-Dixie. There have been discussions with the regarding redevelopment, but they have not submitted anything formally. So at this point, we do need to proceed with the ATM as a special exception request. There are always issues of impacts to adjacent properties that need to be considered, but without a specific set of plans from Winn-Dixie, we feel it is appropriate to move forward at this time based on the information that we have. Our findings in regard, there are 10 criteria, as you recall, regarding special exceptions. In our latest report, we adjust 3 criteria which regard impact to adjacent properties. And I'd like to go through those if I could. The first criteria, actually criteria number 2, is that the use is designed, located, and proposed to be operated, that the public health, safety, and welfare and convenience will be protected. Our finding is that the proposed drive-up ATM has been reviewed for adequate vehicle queuing, traffic circulation, parking, drainage, and landscaping, and the proposed site plan for this addition meets the requirements of the land development regulations and will not adversely affect public health, safety, welfare, or convenience. Criteria number 3 is that the use will not cause substantial injury to the value of the property in the neighborhood where it is to be located. Our finding is that although the proposed ATM is proposed for location between an adjacent commercial site and the beach, the ATM is located in an existing parking lot, or is proposed for location in an existing parking lot. It's not expected to significantly affect the future development potential of the adjacent property. Again, it's a relatively small structure that will not be continuously used, so our finding is that there will not be adverse impacts to the neighboring properties. And criteria 4 is that the use will be compatible with adjoining development and the proposed character of the area in which it is to be located. The ATM is proposed for location in an existing parking lot, and the subject parcel is located along Gulf Boulevard in an area that contains other automobile-oriented commercial uses. The proposed ATM will not be out of character with the district in which it is proposed. I reference in our report the other criteria, which are in our previous staff report dated November 19th, 2015. I'd like to go ahead and hand this out to you and enter it into the record, as I don't believe you were copied on this for this meeting. So you're not getting away from paper completely. But again, our finding is based on the review criteria for the special exceptions of Section 110-24B addressed above and in our staff report dated November 19th, 2015. Staff recommends that the local planning agency recommend approval of the special exception. And I'd be glad to answer any of your questions regarding our findings.
Mike?
Oh, you need one more copy? Oops.
Any questions for staff by any of the board members?
Mr. Chair, the only thing that I can add is that I did have a conversation with Mr. Gustavo Pines, who's co-owner with his father, I think, of the Pines Plaza. And despite the potential of any development, he said that this ATM would not proved to be problematic, so he had no objection to its approval. I think at the November meeting, Louis, if I'm correct, I believe I was the one that brought it up and said, hey, wait a minute, let's not have an ATM dictate how that parcel is developed, and it won't be anywhere close to it, so we're in good shape, if you want to go
Okay.
ahead with the approval.
Okay. Well, the applicant representative, did you want to make a presentation or any comments, anything you'd like to add?
I was originally approved to put this ATM in there back in March of last year.
Just before you get started, we need your name and your.
Oh, I'm sorry, David Yascavage, I'm with Security Vault Works, work for Wells Fargo.
Tom, do we need to do the swearing-in piece now for everybody while we're at that point, or? Why don't we do that blanket?
On any case, whether it's this one or the two public hearings, if you could stand up, raise your right hand, and we're going to swear you in all at the same time. Anyone that's going to talk, okay? Got everybody now? Swear that the testimony you're about to give is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom. Now, sir, go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to add was that back in March of last year, we received a building permit for this ATM. It was when we went in to get a revision because the site was not correct, or, when we got there, that we were told that we had to go through this process. So I'm a little confused how we got a building permit previously, and now I'm having to go through this whole process after the fact. I have a copy of the building permit that was granted to me.
You can sit. Mr. City Attorney, was the ATM subject to the development agreement on that project?
Specifically, there was specific emails and correspondence that the ATM would be considered a special exception and they would have to come back for approval.
Right.
So it would not have been approved through the building permit process. If that was done, it's my belief it was done without the knowledge of that string of emails and direction when the development agreement was originally
Correct.
adopted. There was an issue relative to a drive-in, and that was for the drive-in for the pharmacy on CVS, and that was of significance, and that was approved.
Correct. Sir, I think what happened probably was that administratively, the building permit was, or the building department permit was approved without knowing that it was subject to the development agreement. So if you get the approval here, obviously there won't be additional fees when you come and reapply, if you need to reapply for the building permit this time.
Okay, I mean, I think at this point, I mean, I'm not really going, it sounds like everybody's pretty much in agreement.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't have much more to offer unless there's a problem.
Okay.
No, I guess, Madam Clerk, would this expire? It was dated 3/9 of 2015.
It was actually rescinded by Ms. Forbes. She,
Oh.
when I submitted the revision,
Understood.
she
Oh, so
voided
she
the
got- so
former.
it got caught. All right,
That's-
so now you just need to
That's a moot
submit
permit
for the
at this
building
time, yes.
permit, and you're good to go, as long as the plan commission votes affirmatively tonight.
Okay. All right, well, thanks for clarifying that. Any questions for the applicant by any of the board members? No? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, do you want to keep this for your records?
Any further
That's
discussion
all right.
on
Just
this?
keep it- Just come on in and we'll take care of it.
Anybody have any comments, thoughts? Speak now and forever hold your peace. No? I'll entertain a motion if anybody wants to put one up.
I'll make a motion to accept it as submitted.
Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Thanks, Dennis. Very good. Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramusin?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner, I'm going to say it wrong.
Domingue,
You got-
yes.
Yes. And Commissioner, Chairperson Everett?
Yes.
Thank
Motion-
you.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Wait, no, wait.
And you
Commissioner
forgot me,
Lawrence. Commissioner
yes.
Lawrence. Sorry.
Whoops.
It's all right.
Sorry about that. We're still getting our new roster down.
Yeah.
Sorry,
thank you.
Dave.
Sorry about that.
I'm still here.
You're here, thank you. All right, thank you, Cheryl. With that, we'll move to the second item of old business, to consider the application for the rezoning of 555 150th Avenue and 565 150th Avenue from a C4 Marine Commercial to PD Plan Development. I'll turn that over to you, Mr. City Manager, if you'd like to have commentary about that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the audience for coming out tonight. This is again, I referenced it before, this is a huge development, and it's the gateway to the city of Madera Beach. And I think you've seen buildings within Madera Beach and within neighboring communities that, geez, if you could have gone back in time and changed that, you probably would have. So you only get one kick at the cat on a development like this, especially when you're talking about development on the beaches. And so I appreciate everyone's interest in this project, because it's certainly a major issue for the city of Madera Beach from now and probably into eternity. So with that being said, I think it's important to know how we got to where we are tonight. And I think it started with the week of Christmas week, and that comes just because of our process and how we hold our meetings. It appeared as if we were trying to railroad this project through and we were going to put a shovel in the dirt before Christmas Eve, and that's just not the case. This is just the normal meeting date that we have. Unfortunately, the next meeting date that we had was the NCAA College Football Championship, of which I was accused of putting it on that date to keep people at home watching football instead of coming to the meeting. And so that's certainly not the case.
I was very irritated by that, by the way.
Yeah, no one was more dismayed than I was. But the issue is this: these types of developments take time because they have to fit the persona of the city that they're in, and I think that that's what we're doing tonight. And so with that, the developer has come in with an application. They applied for X amount of density, X amount of height, and they've reduced that. They heard you at the last meeting, and they're going to represent that tonight. And that's important to, decide whether or not that's palatable to you tonight, or if it's not and you want to see something else. The other thing that is germane to the conversation is there are things that this gentleman can do with his private piece of property that he doesn't need our permission for, and staff will comment on that. But you have to remember that he owns this piece of property and he doesn't need our permission to do certain things. To do what he's applying for, he does need our permission, and that's why he's here tonight. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to staff so we can go ahead and give the staff report, and then we'll go on from there. But before that, I was going to introduce City Attorney Tom Trask. The term quasi-judicial hearing is a very complicated issue, and I'm the city manager, and I don't know if I fully understand it, and that's what Tom joked around. That's his job security for tonight. So he's going to explain to you the quasi-judicial part of this and why the process has gotten us to this point in time tonight, and then we'll go on with the staff report, and then the commission can go ahead and ask questions, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. City Attorney Trask?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of different things tonight. First of all, there are two ways for an application to be considered by the city. One of the ways is legislatively, where it would come before the city commission for consideration, approval, and possibly before you, depending upon the type of application that it actually is. There are certain applications that come before you that are quasi-judicial, and those are the applications that deal with not with a global issue that would go citywide, but it would be an issue that would pertain to a particular piece of property based upon a particular set of facts. That's what you've got here tonight. This is a continuation of the hearing that took place on January 11th. This quasi-judicial hearing is a hearing where you are the judge and the jury of the testimony and evidence that's presented to you. You will consider only the testimony and evidence that's presented to you at this meeting and the testimony and evidence that you received on the January 11th meeting. You are not to make your determination based on ex parte communications unless they're specifically brought forth today and explained as to who you talked to, when you talked to, and to see if there is any objection for that being considered by the applicant. You're not to take into consideration the emails that you may have received or letters that you've received. You were to make your determination based solely upon, again, what you hear today and what you heard on January 11th. There's a long history of the reasons why you're doing that, and it starts back about 15 years ago with a case called Snyder versus Brevard County, and that gave us the direction as to going this particular way. Tonight, you're going to start off with where you left off the last time, and it was very clear to me and the others that were here in the audience that you were not to receive any additional evidence, that you were going to make your determination based solely upon what you had heard at that hearing on January 11th. There has been a change in the application, however. In the application, revisions require you to basically open up the public hearing again. So staff is going to make this is how I foresee it happening. Staff is going to make a presentation. So Mr. Cerna will tell you the changes that have been made in the application, the reduction in the size, the density, and so forth. So you hear that. Obviously, he'll be available to answer any questions. We also have the city engineer here in the audience to ask questions of an engineering matter if you need that. Then once we're complete, the applicant, Ms. Cole, and her presentation will be made based, solely upon the changes that have been made, not opening it up all again to where we were at the beginning of the first hearing. And once that is complete and your questions of her and her witnesses, then it would be opened up to the public. And Mr. Chair, I would think that you would want to direct the public to concentrate on the revisions to the application so that you're not hearing the same testimony that you heard before. And I would also suggest that you would direct those that are going to testify today that they try to not duplicate the testimony of others, because if you hear it once, you don't need to hear it 100 times. And so that's a suggestion. I know that you've mentioned that before. I'd also like you to know that even though there was a public advertisement that this matter would be taken up by the City Commission tomorrow night, it is not going to be taken up by the City Commission tomorrow night. It will be taken up on March 16th, and at that day, on March 16th, the development agreement would be considered, and your recommendation, whether it's for or against, along with the first reading of the rezoning ordinance, and then on April 12th will be the second reading of the rezoning ordinance. Both of those meetings are going to begin at 6 p.m. So I've mentioned these things to you and also to the public at the same time so that everybody basically understands where we're coming from. I'm here to answer any questions that you have relative to the process or the application if you have those. And I know that Ms. Cole will have maybe an opening statement or a closing argument that she's going to make once the witnesses have completed their testimony.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Attorney.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add, I said this before, in real estate, it's always location, 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 right? Government, it's perception, perception, perception. Tomorrow night, this is not on the Board of Commissioners' agenda because of me solely. And the reason for that is I understand now the quasi-judicial part of this. However, if you're John Q. Public, what you see is the Plan Commission approving it on Monday night and the Board of Commissioners taking it up on Tuesday night. And that looks as if it appears, if I was just, out on the sidewalk, that it's being railroaded through. And so despite the fact that it could be done like that, I didn't like the perception. And I know the applicant is probably not pleased with that, but I've communicated my concern with them. And it's not fair to my 5 bosses to get a recommendation one night and have to act on it the next night, even though the quasi-judicial part of it allows for that. And so that's why this is going to be delayed a little bit, and the Board of Commissioners will not take it up until the middle of March. I believe the date's March 15th.
16th.
16th, sorry.
Right, and any decision that happens here is a recommendation to the City Commission as well. I mean, they can either accept it or reject it, so.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. Did any of the board members have a question for the city attorney? Everybody clear on the process? We're all good? Well, with that, we'll move forward. Mr. Cerna, could you give us a staff overview, please?
Yes, Mr.
Of the
Chair.
changes?
Yeah, before I go over the changes, I'd like to just, again, reiterate what we're hearing tonight. This is a planned development rezoning, and I know this board probably has a good understanding of this, but it will help, I think, guide some of the discussion that we're going to have tonight. It is a planned development rezoning, and with that process, the planned development process allows developers to vary design standards, typically height and setback, but it also allows them to propose mixed-use developments and be creative and offer flexibility and higher design standards than you would get under a regular development. And with that, the developer has proposed things like architectural standards and varied building heights and things like that. So this is a planned development. The owner does have zoning of C4 marine commercial as it exists now, so there are development rights associated with the property. And some of the uses that are allowed in the marine commercial district are marina and commercial docks, boat repair and sales, restaurants, tourist dwelling units, retail office and personal service uses, commercial fishing activities, charter and boat operations, adult entertainment establishments, and dwelling units located on the second floor above the first floor of commercial or office units within the district. And then there are also a list of accessory uses, which will include things like marine and boat storage, wireless communication antennas. But again, so there are development rights associated with the property currently, but we are going through this process as a planned development so we can review a conceptual plan with the project, and along with that, we have a development agreement to enforce the standards of the concept plan. And again, this is a concept plan. There will be more detailed plans following up down the road where we will look at permitting issues. We will look at things like traffic concurrency in more detail. During the plan development process, we do look at impacts to public facilities on a higher level. It's a snapshot in time, but when development actually occurs, those issues have to actually be re-looked at because development could take place years down the road. Conditions could change with public facilities. Other developments could come along. So although we do look at things like concurrency, they will be looked at in greater detail, as will individual site plans. And like I mentioned at the last meeting, I'll reiterate, the concept plan is a maximum plan of development. The developer could come in with somewhat less development and still be consistent with the concept plan. And with that, I will explain what has changed. They are proposing at this point, this development is 272 temporary lodging units, 68 condominium units, and 18,000 square feet of commercial, including a 200-seat restaurant and a marina. It has changed from the last development. The temporary lodging units have decreased by 53 units from 325 to 272. And the height has decreased from a maximum of 117 feet to a maximum of 93 feet. We reviewed this at the last meeting in regard to the criteria for rezonings, and in terms of the impacts to, in terms of consistency with the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan, compatibility, impacts to public facilities, and the public interest. The proposed reduction would actually be more compatible, or would be more consistent with the criteria. Those criteria are in your agenda packet. I can go through them again if you would like, but again, we did go through them at the last meeting. This is a reduction in height, a reduction in density, so as you would expect, it is more consistent with those review criteria in terms of less impacts visually and less impacts to public facilities. Staff is recommending that you forward this with a recommendation of approval, and I'd be glad to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cerna. Any questions for Mr. Cerna by the board? No? Everybody good? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, staff is going to tender into evidence the staffing report that you've already received, so we'd like it to be received into evidence.
All right, thank you.
There's the cell phone, man. It always goes off right in the middle of meetings, right? Come on, Mike. All right.
So with that, we'll move to presentation by the applicant.
Before we do that, we want to I want to make sure that everybody understands that not only are we talking about the zoning issue, there are two different items on the agenda, but also the development agreement.
Yeah, we're considering 2 and 3 simultaneously. You're right.
So I think that Mr. Cerna should probably go into the changes in the development agreement as well. It's basically the site data table, and there's also a memo dealing with the impact fee
Okay.
estimate as well, too.
Okay. we'll consider that. I'm going to go ahead and read into item 3 since we're going to consider both. And item 3 is to consider the application for entering into a development agreement between the City of Madeira Beach and Holiday Isle Marina. So, Mr. Cerna, if you could comment on that staff report, please.
Yes, consistent with the changes that the applicant has proposed, and I just explained, the applicant has revised the development agreement, and we've given you a draft development agreement. As the attorney indicated, the impact fee information has been revised and is a separate attachment. And our recommendation is that we're finding that the development agreement is consistent with the requirements of the code, and we're recommending approval, and we would like to enter our staff report into evidence.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board to staff on the development agreement?
No? Well, with that, we'll move on to the applicant.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, Commission members, City Manager, staff. Thank you again for having us here this evening and from a continuation from the January 11th meeting. My name is Katie Cole with the law firm of Hill Ward Henderson, 600 Cleveland Street, Suite 800, Clearwater, Florida, 33756. Excuse me, representing the applicant entities who are the owners of the property, and Mr. Holton is the principal of those entities. As Mr. Trask said, we would like to ask that confirm that last month's record is incorporated by reference, the evidence that was presented therein, which I believe Mr. Trask confirmed was the case.
Yes.
So going on Mr. Trask's lead, I wanted to give a short recap and then speak specifically as to the changes. In 2005, the city adopted the planned development zoning category, and this set forth the ability for property owners to seek flexibility, as Mr. Cerna stated, with respect to height and setbacks and other dimensional standards. In 2009, you all created the special area plan to facilitate redevelopment in the town center corridor. In 2014, you amended the special area plan for certain areas and to clarify how density and intensity should be calculated on properties which are part of the special area plan. As Mr. Cerna testified, and as the evidence was presented at the last hearing, this project, as it was previously presented, complies with both your plan and the code. However, at last month's meeting, there was a lot of public input and an expression by the board that you would like to consider more public input, and the staff reached out and asked the applicant if there were any modifications to the plan that he would be agreeable to. And so he did reduce the scope of density and height of the project, and that is what is before you today. The comprehensive plan contemplates specific level of service, and a traffic study that was provided previously showed that the original development did not degrade the level of service below the existing level. The revised traffic study was submitted that contemplating the lesser development and obviously shows a reduction in traffic associated that's proportionate. The traffic consultant is here to answer any questions on this revised study and the difference between the two. The code also contemplates maximum development, and the plan is well below the maximum, but the applicant further reduced the scope, reducing density and height. The architect is also here to discuss this as needed. I'd like to introduce our team, and Mr. Ed Hooper with the Consus Group, Islan Petrokants with Behar Petrokants, our architect, Robert Pergolesi with Gulf Coast Consulting, our traffic consultant, Dushka Hovey with Northside Engineering here, and our applicant property owner, Mr. Jim Holton. At this point, I'd like to introduce Ed Hooper to say a few words.
Thank you.
Planning Commission Chairman and members, good evening, and staff, thank you again for your valuable time and input on the future of your city. My name is Ed Hooper, H-O-O-P-E-R, a principal in the Consus Group, a government community relations firm located in Clearwater, Florida, 2040 Lakeview Drive. The zip is 33763. You've heard tonight from both the city attorney and the city manager, and from Mr. Holton's attorney, Ms. Cole, about what is before you tonight. And even though you heard some numbers that spoke about the reduction in what what's before you previously. I wanted to put a number to that just for you to maybe visualize mentally and think about that. The plan you have before you tonight, based on what your code allows, for density, the full-time residential condo is still at max. It's still 100% of what you allow per acre. The overnight accommodations are 47% of what your code would allow for maximum density. The bulk of this project, the total floor area ratio, what covers the dirt, based on what the maximum of your code allows, this project today occupies 42% of the maximum floor area ratio or bulk of the project. That's a pretty significant less number than what someone could come in and ask for. We think that's a substantial change. As a matter of fact, the two hotel components of this property have lost 2 stories on each building. And to put that in some perspective, today I was on 150th Avenue this morning, and that matches 8 stories, including the parking, which is exactly the height of the Boca Vista condominium unit, 7 over parking. So we are compatible with some of our surrounding properties. We think we will be a valuable asset to not only the entryway to your city and your town center and your newly spectacular rebirth of this corridor into Madeira Beach. If there are specific architectural questions, the architect is here, and I believe if there are none, I'm turning the next portion over to our traffic consultant, Mr. Robert Pergolesi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Robert Pergolesi. I'm a principal with Gulf Coast Consulting, AICP certified planner, PTP transportation planner. My address is 13825 Icott Boulevard, Suite 605, Clearwater 33760. As stated, we had prepared the traffic study for the original project, and since there were some revisions to the plan based on testimony last month, I was asked to revise the traffic study so that the numbers are consistent with the plan that's before you tonight, so everything's consistent. As you recall, when I was here last month, we had met the levels of service standard for the city roads, and I'm happy to say that there's no change. As a matter of fact, the project impact is somewhat less, as would make sense since there's been a reduction in the number of rooms. The revised traffic analysis was submitted, and the project traffic has been reduced to now 3,548 daily trips, and the PM peak hour trips have been reduced to 289 peak hour trips.
Sir, I don't want to interrupt you. Can you speak more into the mic? They're having trouble hearing at home. Thank you.
Those trips then, as they're distributed to the roadway system, they get split. Some go west towards the beach, some go east back towards the mainland. With the project impacts, the revised project impacts, the roadway, 150th Avenue or Tom Stewart Causeway, would still operate at level of service C, and any movements into and out of the driveways would operate at level of service D or better. As I testified last month, the capacity at the level of service D, which is your standard, is 3,580 vehicles per hour. The existing traffic is nowhere near that. The existing traffic is about 2,100, 2,200 vehicles per hour. So with the project impacts, we're expecting that to increase to 2,300, a little bit over 2,300 vehicles per hour, but there's still a great deal of excess capacity before you hit the standard maximum capacity that the roadway can handle. As a result of the reduced impacts, there really aren't any changes to the expected improvements that we're looking at making. They were not significant enough where we would be reducing the length of the turn lane. So the turn lane that we were extending before, we're still going to be extending the turn lane by the same amount of feet, relocating the median opening a little bit further to the west to get it further away from the bridge, as the FDOT had indicated they wanted done. at the pre-application meetings that the applicant and staff had with them months ago. So the results, although slightly different, slightly reduced traffic, the improvements that are expected to be made are identical to what we testified to last month. And I'll turn that over to Mrs. Cole to
Just-
finalize, and then
Any questions on that for him? So, just one point of clarification. So even if this board were to approve the project, the city commission were to approve the project, it's still subject to FDOT approval. Is that correct?
correct. FDOT would need to approve any permits that are applied for.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cole?
Just real briefly, I wanted to follow up on something Mr. Cerna had said in his report that we didn't discuss last month, which was the current C4 commercial uses that are available. And I was just jotting down as he was saying that tourist dwelling units, commercial and residential, marina and commercial boat slips are all currently permitted uses in C4. Your code, or your comp plan actually, in the 2014 amendment that you made in ordinance 2014-07 said that if a property owner wants to mix those uses, it triggers the plan development process, which triggers the development agreement process. So that is why we're here today. Any of those individual uses could have been developed independent of this process by right. However, because of the mix of the uses, which is what the special area plan contemplates and encourages property owners to do, that is what triggers the plan development process and request for rezoning, as well as the development agreement. So with that, I'd simply reiterate that pursuant to the staff testimony and the evidence presented in the record both last month and this month, this application meets the criteria in your code. It meets the objectives and goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and we respectfully request your recommendation of approval to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, I've
Yes,
got
sir.
not necessarily a question, but I think some information that would be germane to the conversation tonight. And Louis, I don't know if you're the consultant to ask, or maybe Mr. Carrier in the audience from an engineering standpoint, but it was just brought up that this is subject to FDOT approval. And I think there's a common misperception that once this deal is done here at the city, it's a green light and go. And I'm wondering if there's a list of necessary approving agencies that the applicant would have to go through, or Ms. Cole, if you can answer that.
Certainly, in your development agreement, there's specific conditions of approval that your staff drafted and provided to incorporate in the development agreement. SwiftMet approval, DOT approval, each of those are articulated there, must be obtained and provided to the city prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy. Of course, the way permits work, you can't really put a shovel in the ground without those permits in hand anyway.
Even including, if I'm not mistaken, county approval, right? It was a funny statement, but someone at the last meeting said, what happens when 500 toilets flush? Well, we need to know that that infrastructure can handle that. So these are all permitted things that they would have to, frankly, hoops that they would have to jump through if indeed you would approve this, and ultimately the Board of Commissioners would approve it in the next 60 days.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cole. Any further questions for the applicant? Any members of the board with questions? No? All right, and with that, we'll move to public commentary. So a few ground rules. Again, I would just respectfully request that if someone comes forward and makes the point that you were going to make, they made your point. So we don't need to hear the same thing 16 times. We're relatively intelligent folks, hopefully. The other thing is as you heard from the city attorney, commentary should be centered around the changes to the development plan, because we pretty much hashed through the items around the development in general. So now this will be reflected on the changes that the applicant has presented. Technically, if they had not come back with any changes, we would not have had to open public commentary. So this is an opportunity for you to weigh in, and we want to hear you on the changes that have been made by the applicant. So with that, everybody's already been sworn in. So when you come forward, one other thing, please lean forward and like almost put the mic in your mouth so that we can hear you, and they can also hear you at home. and also state your name and address when you come forward. And Cheryl, are you going to try to keep up with that, or is there a form? Oh, is that you, Dave? Okay, the other item I'll mention is we'll follow the same process. If you're familiar with city commission meetings, public commentary is limited to 3 minutes per person. There's no, I'm giving 2 of my minutes to this person and that kind of stuff. It's 3 minutes, and I'm going to hold you to 3 minutes. I think you can make a sufficient statement in 3 minutes out of respect for everyone's time. So with that, I'll open it up. Would anyone like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, Rick Willis, 555 Lillian Drive. Question, with respect to the Department of Transportation, if we clear the hurdles here in terms of approving and then the commissioners approve it, and the FDOT comes back and says, okay, we'll approve it given the following requirements, what is the process for this board or the commission to have a determination on that? For example, if they come back and say, you have to put a red light right there. Okay, now we got 3 red lights in a row. Do we get a chance to re-vote on that, or what's the process?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just jump in. This is for testimony to be received. It's not a question and answer period. I mean, Katie and I will go ahead and try to take notes as to the questions that were asked, and either staff will make a response to that, or Katie and her experts will testify as to that when we're done. But we can't have the back and forth questions answered. We'd never get done tonight. It's testimony only, and then we'll try to answer the questions at the end, if that's okay with you.
Okay, so we'll make note of that. Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening. John Dalton, 150th Way, 150th Way. In regards to the traffic, I was leaving yesterday morning, and, you know, this doesn't happen often, but going to church at 8:15. I got stuck at the bridge for a boat or two, which Sunday wasn't the best boating day in the world. It wasn't. I was there over 20 minutes, as far back as I could see, down to Madeira Way and to Gulf Boulevard, and I'm assuming south and northbound. Traffic was backed up. You know, what's going to happen when we add all these other buildings and people coming in and out? And if that was just letting one boat get through there on a Sunday morning. Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir. Any additional commentary? Steve?
Steve Kochek, 15301 2nd Street East, Madeira Beach. The idea of this plan development, I was on the board when we were doing it, when Jill came back. It was a way of getting the city to have tremendous input into any project going. As far as anything that we wanted to do with the project, this gave us the opportunity. Yes, they can do what they want with that property, but it's very restrictive. If they go with C4, they have the height restriction, they have all the other restrictions. They're not coming here because they're nice people. They're coming here because it's a deal for them. And what the deal for us is that we get something that's beautiful on the entranceway to our city. And that was the whole idea of it, that this area was going to make some changes, and if anything, at least let us have the input into it. And that was the whole idea of this plan development district and the outlook of the plan. And that goes back to the master plan. And that was the suggestion that was given in redevelopment, that if you're going to do something, first do something with your regulations. Your land development regulations were very strict. So the idea that was come up with was, one, to deal with parking, and the other one was to deal with having as much control over these projects as possible. They don't have to go before the magistrate for variances. You're giving them the height. The commission will give them the height. I believe that I'm being correct here. If I'm not, Shane, just jump in. And that's to our advantage, because the cost of property and all things had to change. And rather than change all those regulations, it was easier to do it this way. We have a board now that can have input in. The public will have input in. And we won't have some of the monstrosities that we had in the past. We will have something that we all can be proud of, we hope. And so with a property like this, it's been an eyesore for a long time. And now we have somebody that's coming forth to do something with it. This is the time that we put our heads together. And some people are going to be a little bit put out. Their views are going to be restricted a little bit. That's an unfortunate part of it. but it's a huge community. And as far as the tourist part of the community, once again, it's something that people will come to want to see. And the effort that's put in by staff and by past commissioners and past boards is how we got to this point. So I'm urging people to come up and speak. Let them say what has to be said. But remember, the overall is when you come over that bridge, what do you want to see? And now you got the opportunity to tell the architect, I want this, I want this, I want this. So when you come in, you're proud of it, and you can say, hey, I had a part in that. And I'm fully in support of the project as long as we can keep our nose in it and keep our fingers in it and keep it moving towards what we can be proud of. Green things, solar panels, things that are going to benefit the future of this community, because we're looking 50 years down the road. We're not just looking into tomorrow. So use your wisdom and use the power that you have to get what you want out of this. Think of what you would like to see when you come in, and they'll work with you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Down on your tiptoes.
Hi, I'm Shirley Nelly, and I'm an owner of the Madeira Bay Docks over on 13205 Gulf Boulevard, and a yacht broker in the community for 25 years. I've chose this spot because I love it. It's unique, and I really don't want anything to destroy the complexity of this place, which is fun, okay? So anyway, what I came to say is that when you come over this bridge, or why don't you drive over on Gulf Boulevard and come over the John Pass Bridge and go in and get to 131st and look to your right, and you'll see this beautiful marina there full of yachts and full of people and full of fun. And this is the same thing that you're going to see when you drive over this bridge. I am going to help run that marina, I hope, if you will just decide to do so. And when I'll make that so spectacular, it'll be beyond belief when you drive in. I'm only worried about the marina. The places that they're going to build there are going to be great. We all know that. I'm running the Madeira over here at the Marriott Hotel, and I took that over, and that used to be an eyesore, right? And now drive over, and everybody sees McDonald's and beautiful yachts. So, okay, all I have to say is let's look to the future and not get so upset about some cars driving by. You're lucky if they do. Some of us are retired and we don't care if we have anybody drive down our neighborhood, but this is a business district and always has been, and I love this beach, so I'm just here to tell you that marina is going to be awesome.
Thank you, Shirley. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am?
My name is Christina Wells. I live at 550 Normandy Road. I initially came to this community because I liked the small feel that it gave me when I came here to live. My concern is the school directly across from the bridge and the children that will be crossing the street when the additional traffic will be coming from these additional buildings that will be put there. My other concern is the height. I love the fact that on Gulf Boulevard that there is a height restriction of, you see it, of 6 stories. And you don't have that on Treasure Island. You don't have that on Clearwater. We specifically have that, and it's wonderful because I can actually see the beach from my house. I mean, I can actually look out my bedroom window and actually see the beach. And that's a wonderful thing. I don't want that to change for anybody else who's going to be restricted by this taller building. Again, I have, if I have, to go across the bridge and the bridge is up, I do get stuck, at Gulf Boulevard, and have to wait for the bridge to go down. I mean, traffic is really bad, and this is just going to make it twice as bad. The height, the traffic, the kids at the school, those are some of my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Rob Wachtel. I live on 14223 East Parsley Drive in Madeira Beach. I mirror what the young lady that just came up and said. Part of the reason why my wife and I moved to this area, we looked at Treasure Island, we looked at Clearwater, and the infrastructure was just horrendous. You look at the buildup, the size, and that's my main concern. The other concern I have is water space management. I believe it's supposed to be 100 slips for this marina. Is that correct? But there's already enough pollution that's happening. I've had 2 oil slicks wind up in my backyard along the water in the past 4 months. So I just want that to be noted as well. I have plenty of people that drive by the house in their boat with their wakes, ignoring the wake signs. And all this traffic is going to increase with this structure that's going to happen. So those are my concerns. I also would hope that what doesn't happen, as with the Barefoot Black Hotel and the testimony that was given there, that seemingly ignored with the concerns of the residents here, because I think that's what most of the people here are concerned about, is just the sheer size and the beachfront eventually dwindling away with the starting of something like an infrastructure like this of such a sheer size. But also the rest of the infrastructure, besides the transportation concerns, is grocery stores, other things like that, that I don't know of any plans that are going to be built that will accommodate this size structure as well to integrate into the rest of Madeira Beach. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Martin at 423 150th Avenue. Mr. Chairman, members, I am referring to the changes that have been made this evening in the presentation, but directly in with the traffic situation. I personally feel that the report as presented by the consultant is faulty, inasmuch as I'm looking at the dating that it was done on, September the 2nd. I'm looking at the time of the year, of course, and the time of the day. I stood outside my place the other day and I, at 7:30 in the morning, watched the traffic from the school. It proceeds now west to the Gulf. At our place around 423, it makes a U-turn. So the traffic is already congested in the morning and in the afternoon from the school traffic. It's just going to continue to get more impacted by the increased traffic that we're going to see. I look on the members here tonight and I don't see anyone that lives right in our area, inasmuch as Boca Vista, Madeira Cove, or Snug Harbor. You don't realize what we are already facing with the increased traffic and what we will have to face as people trying to get in and out of that area. There's only one provision that I see in the plan for improving the traffic situation, and is by extending the laneway, the westbound left turn lane that allows traffic into the property that we're talking about. There's no provision for anyone else in the neighborhood to have easier access to our properties or exit from our properties. So I ask you to really consider what the impact is going to be now, and also 4 or 5 years from now, when the rest of Gulf Boulevard, 150th Avenue, is developed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? No? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Arnie Alloway, 13019 Pelican Lane. We had the man up here that said about the traffic study. I'm not allowed to ask questions, but I wish you people would. He said that road can handle 3,100 cars per hour. What does 3,100 cars per hour look like on that road? Is it gridlock? Is it backed up to Gulf Boulevard? He said it would be considerably less than that, maybe 2,800 per hour. What does that look like? Is that only backed up to Madeira Way instead of Gulf Boulevard? I would just like to know what this traffic would look like at that volume.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Tim Paddock. I'm at 425 150th. As I've been looking at the plan and the history of this, and regarding the new plans and the changes to the plans that have been made, the ordinance that was passed at the end of 2014 that allows for the additive nature of the development. I think the gentleman earlier said that, you know, it's like 42% less than what could the maximum amount that could be put on that piece of property. That's because it's additive. And, you know, if you go into any other property around, those 60 condo units would be it. So, you know, that's what's really troubling me here is that at some point an ordinance was passed in order to kind of pile on one piece of property. So if you talk about visualizing what this thing might look like, I live in Snug Harbor. We've got 48 units. A little bit smaller piece of property than what we're talking about here. So on that piece of property, you could have a 25% increase in the number of condo units and approximately 3 Marriott courtyards. Can you imagine that on that piece of property? Plus a restaurant, plus all the parking that's got to happen. It's just way overbuilt. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Kathy Behrman, 225 Boca Ciega Drive. I hate being up here because I hate talking, but, and I also don't really believe what I say is going to make a difference. And that bothers me, but I have to say it, okay? I believe your jobs is to keep us safe, and you're not keeping us safe, okay? On Gulf Boulevard, if they have 5 drums out there, the line is forever. Now think about, we are an evacuation area. Okay. You have to get me off here when there's a problem. And you're not going to do that. You can't even do it now. And you're going to put more cars here. You're going to put more situations, and it's only developing. It's not because you love the area. We are not, Shane, a dumpy town. We are a funky town. And I resent that remark in the newspaper, and I'm hoping they wrote it wrong. But you really are here to help us. We are a different town, a different city. We have stood up and stayed back when everybody wants money and growing. Tell me why we need that. We can do that. You have the ability to say to any developer, you do it our way or you don't do it. Stand up and say, this is our town. We've been funky, we're little, we're going to be different. I don't want to be someplace else. I want to be here. You came here because you wanted to be here. You came here because we're a funky little town, and it would allow you to be someplace to grow. And why are we losing this? Because somebody wants to make more money? And I don't mind money. Good, but don't kill us. We're special here. I remember sitting here a couple of years ago, and they said, Treasure Island, let them be our developer. Let them come and inspect us. Bunk. We inspect ourselves. We are unique. Once you let it go, we're like everybody else. Stop doing that. This is the turning point. That is really the only area that when people come in, we could be special, unique, beautiful, small, Nobody else can do that. They all sold out. We don't need to sell out. We're pretty special. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because looking at your face, you're all special. That's why you're here. You could be watching TV, you could be out drinking, you could be doing anything else. And you are right here. Stand up to the inevitable and spit, guys. You're not doing it. Come on, give us a break. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Bob Spaeth, 13417 Gulf Lane, Madeira Beach. I was a tenant on the island. I had Madeira Beach Seafood for 30 years. I've seen a lot of developers come through and propose a lot of plans. I hear a lot of people talking here, but they need to realize that when the oil people came here, they wanted to take that and make that an oil yard. How would you like welding and boats? And that's zoned for that. So some of the people that don't want to develop that, and we have a chance right now to develop that at the entrance of our city. Please, I know he's dropped the density, he's trying to accommodate. Please give him the approval and let's move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Andy Wells, 515 Normandy Road. So I think a lot of us here are in agreement that that needs to be developed. We need to put something unique on that piece of property. I think the challenge that's ahead of us is working out the density, the size, and the scale of what needs to go on that property. I think if we make it too tall, or we make it in a way that the parking cannot handle the volume of the people, we actually run the risk of people not coming to Madeira Beach. And that worries me, because Madeira Beach is a beautiful place. And I think what we need to think through as a city council is actually to look at this in relation to the other 4 or 5 developments that you talked about, Shane, in this area. And make sure that our community stays what it was designed to be and doesn't become a St. Pete Beach or a Clearwater. Or we make the bold statement that says we want our community to become the middle ground with Clearwater Beach, St. Pete, and Madeira Beach as the #1 destination for tourists. And I think that's the statement that we're debating here. I don't believe we're looking at how the development will be perceived, how beautiful it will look as you come across the bridge. I think we're looking to you as the members of this council to review what do we want Madeira Beach to be in 2020 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? If not, I'll close the public commentary. Thank you, everybody, for your input. We appreciate that. Now, at this point, I'll turn it over for discussion to the board.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, Tom, I don't know about you, but I wrote down 4 questions.
I've got 2 questions.
All right, so I think the one that I've got is the BOC giving them height. Mr. Kochek had answered that, or asked that, you know, are we going to give them height? Tom or Louis, you can comment on that, but the Planned Development District allows for giving height above what we're allowed. If we can ask the applicant, or Louis, you probably know this, there was a gentleman that asked the number of slips associated with the project, and I think that was based off of a reference to, you know, pollution and people not obeying the wake signage and things of that sort. How many slips are associated?
The plan says, that I see, says 57 existing, 107 additional, for a total of 164. But they have to be permitted.
Is that correct?
That is correct. That is according to the plan.
But that would have to, they would have to be permitted.
They've all got to be permitted.
Correct.
That's correct, yeah. There's no guarantee they'll get that many.
Correct, right. So, and then the final thing, and, well, actually, there was, the first gentleman that Tom asked that we don't have a question and answer debate about was the final FDOT plan. I'm sorry, I didn't know your name. You're the taller gentleman with gray hair and a mustache. So if he's still out there, do we get to see the final FDOT permitted, approved plan, and do we get to act on it? And I would imagine the answer is no, unless we ask that we have to.
Well, they are required to coordinate and get the permit. That's required in the development agreement from DOT. It's very much a hypothetical question because the applicant does coordinate with DOT and staff ensures that there's coordination at this point. So that's how we got to the concept of the turn lane extensions and things like that. Now, DOT does not like red lights. So it's very doubtful that anything that drastic would ever get approved. But if for some reason there was a minor change required by DOT, then the applicant would be required to make that change.
Right. And I think you or the applicant could attest to the fact that FDOT certainly doesn't like red lights, especially in proximity to bridges.
Yes.
That's safe to say.
Absolutely.
Just to follow up on that,
Yes.
Section 9 of the development agreement, subsection 3, states that the development as it looks, including the off-site roadway improvements, must substantially comply with what's shown in the development agreement. And so substantial compliance would be determined by your staff and city attorney. So if it was a substantial change in what's included in the development agreement, it would potentially require an amendment to the development agreement with respect to the off-site roadway improvements.
Okay.
Right. And then the final question, Mr. City Attorney, that I wrote down, and again, I'm sorry I don't know your name, but it's a gentleman wearing a gray UPS sweatshirt, and he asked, I thought a very intelligent and germane question. 3,100 cars per hour, does that mean that they're gridlocked? Does that mean that they're going the normal speed limit? So on and so forth, and I'm wondering if the applicant or their traffic study analyst could answer that question.
I think it was with respect of what does that traffic look like, and I don't know that anybody can answer that question specifically. I mean, there's a lot of nuances. I'll have.
Well, I would imagine if it's rated for 3,100 cars per hour, that wouldn't mean that they're standing still, obviously, that they would be functioning, correct?
Robert Pergolizzi, for the record again. Level of service D is your standard. The level of service D maximum capacity is 3,580 cars, okay? The level of service D standard does account for some level of congestion, okay? Typically, level of service D on a roadway, vehicles are traveling, their average travel speed is usually between 60 and 70% of the posted speed or the maximum speed. So if you were posted, I believe we're posted 40 miles per hour, you know, you'd be able to move, you know, probably in the 30 mile per hour range throughout that section from the bridge all the way out to Gulf Boulevard, okay? That's the way the traffic numbers work. And to follow up on what Ms. Cole said, we will be coordinating with FDOT on the improvements for the left turn lane, and those would need to be permitted. And if DOT does ask us to make any changes, we would be required to make the changes that DOT requests.
And there was also a comment about the time that the survey was taken, but as I understood it from your original presentation, there was some weighting that you used to balance that across an annualized pattern. Is that right?
Yes. The traffic counts that we conducted were conducted on September 29th. It was a Tuesday. I don't get to pick the times in which I do my traffic studies or the times of year. I was contacted in September by the applicant to prepare a study for which I had to meet a deadline by mid-October. So what happens is you collect the traffic counts when you can, and then those are seasonally adjusted to peak season conditions. We're in the peak season right now. We're just beginning it, okay? Peak season is referred to, it's technically is the highest 13 weeks out of the year, okay? The peak week usually occurs in March, okay? So when we adjust to peak season, we're adjusting upwards from any counts that we've taken at any other time during the year. We adjusted our counts upwards. I believe there was a comment made about morning, and that, you know, the school generates more traffic in the morning. The school generates its traffic 7:30 in the morning, and then again about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I will point out that in the revised traffic analysis, I did add another column into the trip generation table that considers our morning peak traffic. And our morning peak traffic is 158 vehicles per hour. It's about 55% of what our PM peak traffic is. So while the school may be more busy in the morning than it is at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, our development is not superimposed our busiest time on top of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Your question?
Tom, did you have anything else? So you had a couple things written down, that was it?
Yeah, I think that we've answered those questions, the ones that I had written down. 2 of them were the exact same ones that Shane had written down, so we covered them already.
Okay, well, before we enter into discussion, Ms. Cole, did you want to close?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interestingly, one of the speakers spoke about community and what will it look like in 2020 and beyond. By state law, every community must contemplate that, and it's called your comprehensive plan. And you all established a comprehensive plan, you drafted it, you debated it, you voted on it several times. It went to the state DEO for consideration and came back for additional votes. And your comprehensive plan sets out the city's vision for the future. As the testimony was presented last month and this month, this meets the goals, objectives, and policies of your comprehensive plan. Property owners have expectations, and those expectations are defined by your comprehensive plan and your land development code. That is how people can rely upon before they come, that is what people rely upon before they ever make application to the city for a development. They go to what's considered the book, they open it, they say what can be done, how can it be done, and how to enter into an iterative process with your staff based upon the vision that was set forth by the leaders of this community. This development complies with those goals, objectives, of policies, and as testimony was presented, all of the criteria in the code. With that, we respectfully request your recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. With that, we'll turn to discussion. Comments, thoughts, questions? I mean, one comment that I would want to make is everybody on this planning board is appointed by the Board of Commissioners. We submit applications and are appointed to either a 2- or 3-year term. We all live here. All of us work. None of us are retired. I have a business in Treasure Island. I have another one up in Seminole. So I drive up and down Gulf Boulevard, and I go across the bridge a lot. So we won't make a decision in a vacuum. We live here as well, and we drive on the same roads that you do. So I just wanted to make sure that, as a matter of fact, I live right around the corner here. So I live on the north end of the city. So I will be very much impacted by this development as well. Any other thoughts or comments by the board?
I mean, I'd just like to say that, I think the applicant, by reducing the size, is trying to work with the community. They felt everybody, heard everybody last time, and I think that's a great thing.
Well, if there's no discussion, is there a motion to be put on the floor?
I mean, I'll make a motion that we accept the application for rezoning from C4 to planned development, and enter into the development agreement with the applicant.
So that covers item 1 and 2. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We do have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Cheryl, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Lawrence?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Domingue?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramusin?
Yes.
Commissioner Carr?
Yes.
Commissioner Everett?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. The next item of business is Planning Commission discussion. Anything that anybody wanted to bring up at this time? We talked a little bit about the possibility of a second meeting, but I think we determined we just do that on as needed. So everybody's good with that? Any old business, Mr. City Manager, that you're aware of, or?
Mr. Chair, the only thing that I can think of that we've kind of shelved after we've put this ATM issue to rest is the digital signage. If you want me to,
Yeah, we'll wait a couple of minutes. We're still in session, folks. We'll wait a couple of minutes for the room to clear. Folks, we're still in session, so if you could keep it down a little bit, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead, Shane, I'm sorry.
again, besides the ATM issue, I can't think of anything other than digital signage, and I know a couple of you have brought it up to me. I can certainly combine it with another agenda item, but the next agenda item is going to be somewhat sizable and it's going to take a lot of your attention. I really think that we stick to once a month, we get a couple of these development issues behind us one way or another, and then we can take that up. No one's really knocking at my door about a digital signage issue from a business standpoint, except for one fine gentleman. But if we want to take it up, we certainly can. But again, you've got some real heavy lifting to do in the next 6 months. So it's completely up to you. I think the education that we've done might have gone lost. We've got new committee members.
Right, because we actually had a consultant come in and make a presentation on digital
signage. We took a field trip
signage.
across the street. We did all that.
Right.
And so, and in fact, if you remember, he's a guy that sells digital signage, and he's like, that's his most unfavorite type of marketing for as far as signage goes. So
Right.
I think it's really going to take a re-education in that, and with these next couple of meetings going to be 2-3 hours a pop, it's just going to be brutal, but it's completely up to you.
Yeah, I think we're good for now. Thank you.
I would appreciate that, especially from a staff standpoint as well,
Right.
because we have to prep for that as well.
Right. Okay. Well, with that, any reports, Mr. City Attorney? Anything to add, or you'd like to comment on?
Well, I just want to comment on the digital sign aspect. There was a recent Supreme Court case that very much affected the sign code in every municipality in the state of Florida. And so when we get to that point about considering it, you should just know that it will not be just the digital signs that we're going to need to deal with. We're probably going to need to deal with the sign code in its entirety. Several local cities are talking about retaining Bill Brinton, who's a local expert. I say local, he's in Jacksonville, to help us with redoing our entire sign codes because of that Supreme Court case. So I haven't talked to Shane about that. That may be something that this city would be interested in doing. It's a cost savings type of thing where we can get a number of cities, we can save some money. But we're going to need to address more than just the digital sign issue when it comes back.
Okay.
So other than that, I don't have anything additional to add. Well, maybe one thing. The special exception that you heard tonight, I know that you've already decided on that, but I just wanted you to know, and any of the public that are here still, it still needs to go to the special magistrate. There'll be a report issued by this planning commission. The special magistrate will then hear the recommendation or the report and then hear the case from that applicant as well. So he has to go through one more step before he gets final approval.
Okay.
Just wanted to remind you of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Stern, anything that you'd like to add?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Next meeting is March 16th?
No.
15th?
March 14th, correct?
Jeff?
Monday the 14th.
Monday the 14th.
Monday the 14th.
Well, I'll buy Mr. Brown a calendar. So the 14th, I have calendars, Jeff. I'll bring you a calendar.
And just so we have that clear, you will meet on the 14th and be taking up a new development issue. On the 16th, the board will be acting on what you just approved.
Okay.
So it'll be that type of cycle here probably for the next 6 to 8 months.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll entertain, if there's nothing further, a motion to adjourn. Come on, I know you're itching.
I'll take that motion to close the meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I will just do an aye vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your time.